Hi, this is Chris Young, and welcome to Good News on Tap for the third Sunday of Easter. We always love a story with a surprise plot twist in the end. Film director M. Night Shyamalan became famous for his surprise endings and his big plot twists in his films like Unbreakable and The Sixth Sense. A surprise ending is even sweeter when you go back through the story and realize there were little clues to the surprise that were scattered throughout the body of the work. Typically, right after the plot twist is revealed, the author or director will give you a brief series of flashbacks. These reveal the trail of breadcrumbs that were foreshadowing the big reveal at the end. In the case of The Sixth Sense, many people have felt obliged to go back and pay to see the movie over and over again, not even waiting for the DVD or cable airings. They wanted to pick up all those little clues along the way that they missed the first time, the hints about what was really going on. Throughout Lent, the repeated theme of these reflections was that there was a big plot twist coming at the end of the story. Each week throughout Lent, I would conclude by saying, "It's not the end of the story." Of course, it was no surprise to any of my viewers that the end of the story was Easter, and the plot twist was the resurrection. In today's Gospel, Luke gives us the story of the disciples on the road to Emmaus. These disciples are like the viewers of an M. Night Shyamalan film who walked out before the big reveal. They can't figure out what happened. They're confused about the events they've witnessed. Then along comes a stranger to help them figure out the real plot of the movie. He guides them through all of Scripture, explaining the trail of breadcrumbs that predicts what was going to happen at the very end. Finally, in the breaking of the bread, the plot twist is revealed. Jesus is among them. It all makes sense now. In the case of a movie with a plot twist, you want to run right out and tell all your friends and family, "You got to go see this movie." However, you're probably careful not to reveal the ending to them. You don't want to spoil it for them. And that's just what the disciples did when they went back to Jerusalem. But there they found that the other disciples had already learned the big surprise that Jesus was risen, so they were relieved to be able to share their own version of the story. In the first reading, however, Paul realizes that this story is too good and he has to tell the whole thing. But he too does a little flashback to show that the clues have been there all the time. He goes all the way back to King David and reminds them that David was told that the servant of the Lord would not suffer corruption of the flesh. He then explains, well, David is dead and gone. The story wasn't about David, but about his heir, Jesus. The foreshadowing of the David story had been fulfilled in Jesus. And this is such a good story, we retell it every week. I mean, break down the story of the disciples on the road to Emmaus. What happens? They gather together, they review the scriptures, they celebrate the Eucharist and discover Jesus present among them, and they go forth to tell the experience. That's a perfect outline of what we do at Mass every week. We gather, we review Scripture, Jesus becomes present in the Eucharist, and we're sent forth to spread the good news. Even though others have heard this story before, we need to tell our version. The disciples on the road to Emmaus experienced the resurrection differently than the other apostles and disciples had experienced it. And in the same way, each of us experiences the resurrection differently. We each have different breadcrumbs that led us to the big reveal at the end. So whether we're telling the story to someone who's never heard it before, like Peter was doing, or whether we're telling it to people who know the big plot twist, as did the disciples on the road, it's important that we share our stories so that everyone can fully appreciate the sweetest of surprise ending stories. And that's Good News on Tap for the third Sunday of Easter.